Gloves Off, Tough Talk Sports Podcast with Christopher R. and Dani. Talking tough on sports, martial arts, and anything in between. Dani, World Martial Arts Hall of Famer, NFL expert, and New York Football Giants fanatic. Christopher R., businessman, promoter, retired flag football athlete, and boxing aficionado. Sit down and throw down. Gloves Off, Tough Talk with Christopher R. and Dani. Gloves Off, Tough Talk Sports Podcast, presented by the See You at 6 Network.
Hello again, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the See You at 6 podcast, Gloves Off segment. Today we're back with Danielle Orsino, who's going to have some talking points that we're going to go over with concussions. Actually, martial arts and concussions, since Danielle has a lot of information that is very helpful to what has been happening in the football as well as martial arts.
Yes.
Take it away, Danielle.
I want you to do me a favor first, Chris. I want you to put this on for me. This is
Here we
a
go. I gotta be
standard.
tested.
This is a standard sparring helmet for most martial artists. This is what you'll usually start out in. You probably see a bunch of kids wearing this. Do me a favor, put that on.
Well, I'm going to trust you on this since you are
That could be your first mistake,
an
but that's okay.
ex-martial arts champion. I don't look good in hats, but here we go. How's that look, Mike?
Oh,
Great. Yeah?
yeah. You like that?
Yeah. Feels good.
Feels good?
Tight?
Yeah, it feels good.
Right, yeah.
How's that feel?
Yeah, it seemed to shake my brain.
Still shaking your brain?
Is that what I'm feeling?
Still good?
Okay, I think I'll take
Yeah?
it off. It
Okay.
makes her a little violent.
Felt okay, though.
You know, you're not back in the ring when I put that on.
You know what? I see a helmet and I just want to punch. I just
see
want to
that.
hit.
And that's a martial arts helmet.
That's what most people wear, okay? In point sparring matches, in your semi-contact continuous bouts.
Okay.
But how did you feel wearing it? Did you feel safe? I mean,
I did. It felt nice and
felt
tight,
okay.
nice and snug. It's got padding.
It's foam. It's called foam dip.
Yeah, no, it felt good.
So how thick you think that is? Just roundabout.
That's good 3/4 of an inch, wouldn't you say?
About that, but compare that to when you used to wear a football helmet.
Well, football helmet, we had a shield over it.
Right, you had a lot.
Plastic shield that we.
Okay, but think about it like this: when you're playing football, depending on your position,
Yeah.
you have somebody running at you. There's not a guarantee they're going to hit you in the head.
No.
Okay.
There's always the chance.
There's a chance.
Yeah.
When you're in martial arts putting this on, that is their goal. That's their sole
Right.
goal,
I understood.
to hit you in
Yeah.
the head.
Yeah.
This is all you're wearing. Your kid can start martial arts at 3 years old. What age can they start football? 6,
Yeah.
7, 8. But you can send a 3-year-old in.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about it, there's a big difference in equipment standards. That's all you're going to get. But for martial arts, that's what they're giving you. For football, they're giving you a lot more.
Okay.
So it's a little scary. When I've seen kids go in, and I see parents send their kids in all the time. Oh, I'm sending them in for discipline. I'm sending them in to toughen them up. That's a big problem right now because a lot of parents drop their kids off and leave.
Sure.
They don't watch them.
Until a tournament comes up.
Until a tournament, but you're doing it once. You're practicing for a tournament every single day.
Yeah. So you're saying they're getting hit in the head.
They're getting hit,
Constantly.
but it's also self-defense. You're not wearing this for self-defense. And in most schools, I know in the schools I've come from, they don't wear this. I never had this till my first tournament. My first tournament was 1.5 years in.
Interesting.
I never wore headgear. I was told, you don't wear headgear out in the street. Okay, well, that makes sense. I mean, I'm learning for self-defense. I'm not going to walk around wearing this.
Right. Sure.
So it was, my first instructor always told me, I don't want you to ever go out there and be stunned when the first time you get hit. And when you think about it, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, from a self-defense standpoint, I'm not going to sit there and say, let me get in my fighting stance. Okay, attack me. No.
Okay.
So when you're punching or getting hit, you don't have equipment on. So you're taught that you should probably train that same way.
I agree. Having boxed when I was younger, I wouldn't want to wear headgear. I would take it off just
No.
to get the real impact.
Exactly. And also, as a woman in the martial arts, there's a certain stigma that you've got to take the hits, can't show any emotion, can't show that you're hurt.
Sure.
So you've got to take those hits and just deal with it. So when I think about the hits I've taken with no equipment on, no safety equipment, I didn't even wear a mouthpiece.
Wow.
I didn't own a mouthpiece until my first tournament. My first tournament, I didn't even know there were women's cups until my first tournament.
Wow.
So there's very different aspects to the martial arts versus other athletics that are more mainstream, such as football, hockey,
Okay.
even lacrosse. I just found out girls lacrosse, they don't wear helmets because they're told there's no checking involved. There's not a lot of contact. But have you felt a lacrosse ball?
Not only that, one collision. I mean.
Just from you're not looking where you're going.
Yeah.
But that ball's flying around. It's the same
Yeah.
ball that the boys use.
Yeah.
I spoke to a lacrosse coach and he said, yes, I've been there when a kid's gotten hit in the head. It's a bit of a scary thought when we come down to all the money
Sure.
that we invest in football.
Sure.
And there is a lot going on, obviously. It's been in the forefront of the news and everything. But I think for martial arts, what we do have to think about is we start the kids at a much younger age. We throw them into contact with self-defense. I think you have to think about where you're sending your kid to martial arts. Make sure, from a parental standpoint, and I'm not saying don't do martial arts by any means. It's done me a world of good. You have to really research where the kid is going, what the school is about, and remember to vet. Really think about where they're going, talk to the other parents,
Yeah.
and look at how they teach, because it's not just about the kid, toughening up.
Right.
And then look into the equipment, because
Yeah, let's
really
talk
is about
about that.
that.
Let's talk about concussions a little more in depth.
Of course.
Define a concussion. What is a concussion?
It's very funny because when you look it up, and I'm sure everybody's Googled concussions and gone to WebMD and the Mayo Clinic, there's no real definition that everybody can agree on. But basically, if we put it in a nutshell, a concussion is any time that the body or the head, it can be a body shot as well, is slammed, shaken, that the brain sustains that hit. So when the brain sustains a hit to where it shakes inside the head, there's a trauma that is involved deep inside the brain where the axons are then whipped. Once these axons are whipped around, there is a degenerative process that takes place.
How many concussions do you have to have before this takes place?
Just one.
Wow.
Just one. And during that time, there is toxins that are released from the axons being damaged. And then we get into the stages of it.
So a major hit could end your career right there. You just wouldn't know it. Is there a test for that?
There is no diagnostic test. It's not like you can go and have a CAT scan or an MRI and say, oh, you've sustained a concussion. It's usually just a subjective, what we call as PERLA in the medical community, where we're looking at the pupils, we're looking to see how they react. Are they equal? Are they reacting to light? There's different things like that. And then we're just looking for the level of consciousness of the person. That doesn't mean are they knocked out necessarily. It's more, can they answer questions? Do they know what's going on? Balance, things like that. So it's a physical exam that the medical personnel is doing.
Define some of the myths surrounding concussions, because football players still are put back in the game.
A lot of times,
dangerous.
Oh, very dangerous. A lot of times people think that you have to be knocked out. There's a lot of things about that right there that's totally off. Usually only 10% of the concussions, people who suffer a concussion, are actually knocked out or knocked unconscious or lose consciousness. So that's the first thing. The big myth that I don't know if you heard growing up, but I always heard it growing up, was that you can't fall asleep after a concussion.
Yes, I've heard that.
That's totally wrong.
Yeah.
The only reason why people used to think you can't fall asleep was if there was a bleed, a subdural hematoma. That's a total myth. You actually want the brain to rest. The outside stimuli of light, of sound, people just talking, that's causing the brain to process. Those axons then have to carry that information. That's bad. We want it to just rest and just chill out. So sleep is actually a very good thing. So that's one of the big myths surrounding it.
And how did you get interested in concussions? Was through your training of martial arts?
Believe it or not, it wasn't really through the trainings, and I've sustained a bunch of hits to the head. But no, it was watching football. I saw Eli Manning when we all know Eli's doesn't have the greatest offensive line
As our
in the
viewers
world.
know, Danielle's a big Eli Manning and Giants fan, as you can
Yes. Bleed blue.
tell.
Bleed blue. Go
Designed a
Giants.
set around it.
Go Giants. No, not at all. Back in 2010, it was a preseason game against the Jets. And Eli went to hand the ball off. It was a running play. And there was some miscommunication. He took a horrible, horrible hit. His helmet actually popped off. Now, why his helmet popped off is a whole other story because I have no idea why it wasn't on correctly. But this boy's head snapped back like a Pez dispenser. His helmet went flying off. He took a header, and when he came up, he had a gash across his forehead. He's bleeding. They swear he didn't have a concussion.
Was
I
the
don't
gash
know.
from the helmet?
No, it was actually from his head coming down and hitting the turf. I don't know if you remember. There's a picture. I'm sure we have it. We'll find it. And he's bleeding. So after that, he couldn't wear a regular helmet. They had to get him a special one, and it was pretty funny looking. But it came out about that far. No lie, it was like
Just so it didn't sit on his
because
forehead?
it couldn't. Yeah, his forehead was cut up.
Oh,
He had
wow.
11 stitches. It was
Okay.
crazy. But he was getting sacked a lot after that because his peripheral vision was cut off. So it was kind of funny to watch. I'm sorry, but it was because he looked a little dopey. He looked like Charlie
Yeah.
Brown in it. But I started looking at it a little differently because they swore he did not have a concussion. To me, it's almost like when you go in the pool and somebody says, "Did you go swimming?" Well, if I went up into the pool and I went up to here and I'm wet from here down, and I'm like, "Nah, I didn't go swimming." But you went in the pool and you got wet. Yeah, but I didn't go swimming. Well, okay, his head snapped back. It's everything that to me says he got a concussion, but you're saying no, it's a subconcussive hit. That's how I see it. But, I mean, where's the line there?
Yeah.
They say he didn't. I just started looking at it a little differently. Like, something's just off. Something's just very off about it. So I just started looking at it and thinking, how do you protect yourself?
Yeah.
And I just watched the whole season through a different lens. And
Interesting.
started kind of researching it. I was starting nursing school and just had to look at things a bit differently.
Can you talk about CTE more in depth?
Everybody wants to know about CTE. It's obviously been in the news a lot, especially with the Aaron Hernandez documentary that came out and what's been going on through everything. But it's a big buzzword right now. CTE, for everybody there who doesn't exactly know about CTE, or maybe you're living under a rock if you're an NFL fan, it's chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Basically, it's a degenerative disease. As of right now, there are no tests for anyone living currently with CTE. There have been some developments with PET scans that they're able to do that they think shows a possibility of anybody who has it. But basically, CTE is a buildup of the protein tau. Now, this is after repetitive hits. It's not just one hit. So don't run to the doctors and think you have tau because you have one concussion. It doesn't work like that. But the way I like to think about it is those axons that I discussed.
Yeah.
Okay. When they've been damaged, think of it as a highway. They carry information to your brain. Okay. This is your brain superhighway. Think of the asphalt on a highway. After it's not been taken care of, that asphalt can bubble up and you wear out. You get that rock.
Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of like the tau. It bubbles up. It starts to build up. Now, none of those impulses can travel. It gets bigger and bigger, and now you have a roadblock. Kind of like the same thing. It gets wider and wider. That's your buildup of tau. The CTE can cause the ventricles in the brain to enlarge, shrinkage in other areas. It's not a good thing. It's degenerative. It's chronic. We have no cure. We don't know enough about it, though. It's still a very fairly new disease in the NFL. It's been around for a long time, but Mike Webster was the first NFL player to be officially diagnosed, and thus the cascade effect has started.
Do you think in the Hernandez case, this had an impact, all these hits he was taking, on what happened to him personally? With getting in trouble with the law, I mean, he was clearly not what you would expect of the Patriots players to be doing what he was doing, hanging out with the people he was hanging out with.
I don't want to completely excuse anything. Murder is murder. But looking at his brain when I saw the slides,
Yeah.
he was stage 3 at 27 years old.
Just explain stage 3.
Stage 3 CTE is not something they had ever seen at anyone at 27. They usually do not see it at anyone younger than 46.
Interesting.
That's a major discovery, and the ventricles of his brain were so enlarged, I gasped audibly when I saw it, because I did not expect that at all. So I believe personally it definitely exacerbated any underlying emotional issues. Okay?
Which he had a lot of, it seems.
He had some
growing up.
problems.
Yeah.
The frontal lobe, everything that I saw, the impulsivity, the impulse control issues, the violence. I'd be very hard pressed to say that it did not contribute. I will not say it was the overall cause of anything, but it was definitely a contributing factor. The paranoia, things like that. Yes, it was was definitely a disturbing.
Not knowing the a lot about what you're talking about, the science behind it. What I noticed when I watched the documentary was that when he got in jail, when he was incarcerated, it was almost as if he was had a sigh of relief that he was like had a break. And my cell is really nice. You got to see this. Talking to his wife.
It was a sociopathic response in one sense, which was crazy. And I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't. But knowing what I know about CT, having studied neurology, as a nurse, it was quite disturbing. But at the same point, understanding the brain and the chemistry involved, it wasn't that unusual. Giving what we know about CTE, the problem with all of this is that we don't know enough about the disease. So I don't feel that you can say, well, it definitely wasn't this or it didn't contribute. I don't think you can say that. I think overall it was a bad situation and he was caught in the middle of it. And so were the victims.
You're talking about the crime itself. I'm
saying the whole, I'm saying CTE. I believe Aaron Hernandez, to an extent, is a victim of CTE, and that exacerbated his other issues. So I think the situation was just a pressure cooker.
Yeah,
and he was there.
I'm inclined to agree with you. Having seen it myself, he looked like he was ready for a vacation when he got incarcerated.
Didn't make sense. Yeah, I agree. 100%.
He said, I get 3 square meals, I get, time to myself. So I think
being in the NFL is a pressure cooker.
Absolutely. And playing for the Patriots is...
Yeah, it's the Patriot way. So, I think it was a lot to begin with. And then you have the underlying issues. What I will say, though, overall, and because of we did see the documentary, both did see it, I think... whatever other issues he had and what they've alluded to, I think that his sexuality being a factor in all of this and a focus, I don't feel was handled very responsibly.
Okay.
And I don't think that should have come into play in a lot of this. So I kind of fault some of the journalists on how they handled things.
Sure.
And I don't think that added.
It didn't help his psychological situation. There was no two ways about it.
I feel that people who are now using that against him to say, well, he did it because he was hiding this or doing that, I don't think that's fair.
Everybody when you're a celebrity is going to make their own comments and their own thoughts, emotionalize it their own way.
Yes,
what
agreed.
What I'm seeing here in our discussion is the fact that he was hit and had
multiple times. And when they showed the montage of his hits, he kept playing because that's how he was brought up, was to not show
he was an animal.
Any hurt. His hits were pretty vicious.
Yeah.
And he kept going. And he did explain that he was on Toradol for a long time. He was on a lot of pain meds for a long, long time, and he just kept going.
Yeah.
So I think that was very interesting that he probably didn't show a lot of his concussions.
Well, look, what it led to, the end result, we all know.
Yes.
So,
agreed.
Like you said, we don't know deep into the mental of it, but
not at all.
I am interested in learning what I've learned here about the CTE, which leads me to my next question. Has the NFL taken any responsibility toward CTE?
Oh, That's a very, it's just not so cut and dry. I'd love to say yes, they have. They've done some things. They've tried. Okay, I'm gonna go out on a limb here.
Okay.
Have they tried? Yes, they've adjusted their protocol. They've done the eye in the sky. Does it need some help? Yes, it does. Okay, it definitely does. They have not fixed it 100%.
Okay.
A lot of these changes have only come in the last 8 years.
Okay.
When you think about where we are now, I would like to think that we would be a little more advanced.
Yeah.
All things considered. Unfortunately, we're not there just yet. The interesting thing is the Mike Webster case is not even 20 years old.
Okay.
When we first discovered it. Now, the NFL retirement board was the first one to admit that, yes, repetitive hits can cause issues. And they did find in favor of him when he did sue for disability. It was back and forth. They took it back. They went back. It was a whole issue. Now, the NFL during this time did, of course, deny, and say, no, there is nothing wrong. When people did bring the smoking gun up to them and say, hey, look, the NFL board says right here, the retirement board says this, and that, and you claim disability. They said yes. They said, well, that's a totally separate governing body. We have nothing to do with that. Stop it. It wasn't until Goodell was called to the carpet by Congress, and he was put through the ringer, and they even went as far as to compare him to the tobacco companies, which I found very interesting, and I have to say I thought it was kind of cool the way they did it, but it's just me. He started to make some changes. I still feel there's a lot to be done, especially when it comes to healthcare.
But it is a business, and those guys are there to do a job, and their job does require getting hit.
It is. So you know how I think they can fix it? Let me put it like this.
Yeah.
Give them more healthcare. That's how I think they can fix it.
Of course.
Give them more money, because right now these guys only get $220,000 for neurology, just neurology, for a lifetime. That's not going to pay a lot. I think they could just give these guys a little more and stop fighting them for the retired players who've played before them. That's all. Just give them more and stop trying to extend the season. That's where I think the NFL needs to back up a little bit, because now there's a danger. So why are you making these guys play longer seasons and extend preseason?
Listen, Danielle, that's all great, and it's nice in-depth information, but they can't seem to get them all to stop kneeling, so I don't understand how you think they might actually take the initiative to help these players afterwards, which leads me to my next question.
Okay. Let's see.
How many, we just had someone retire this week because of 8 concussions?
Luke Kuechly retired this week. He did.
Forced, or did he do it on his own?
No, he did it on his own. I think Kuechly came to the conclusion through a lot of self-reflection, which I know we're going to cover in the next one. But Kuechly retired. Antonio Gates retired. Antonio Gates I don't think had anything. I think that was on his own. But, we've had other guys retire early.
Wait, I have a list here of quite a few.
Yes, we've had a lot of guys retire on their own.
Urchill?
Yes, these guys, there's been a lot of young guys that have retired on their own. We've had Chris Borland, Calvin Johnson, AJ Tarpley. I mean, we've had Eugene Monroe. These guys have all retired.
Were these guys out of their
2016.
contracts?
No, these are 30 or younger, some of these guys. No, it was time.
They had to wait till their contract was up, obviously.
Yeah, but, a lot of them retired citing lack of safety equipment. Some of them felt, they've just taken too many hits. Bodies are broken down. They feel it's just time to go. So.
Well, that happened with Gronk, right? I mean, a big guy like that, laying out for passes the way he does, diving the way he does, taking the hits.
Yes.
He's got to be less than 30 years old.
Gronk is, yes. Gronk, look, he's a Patriot, so I'm going to be careful.
I know, we don't want to go down that road.
I'm going to be very careful here, okay?
That was another episode.
But what I will give Gronk credit for, all right, look at me, Gronk, I'm giving you a little love here, okay? It doesn't happen often that I do this with a Patriot. Not many Patriots I'll do this for, but you I will, okay? Just saying. Gronk played with his heart and his soul. Not going to say mind, because it's Gronk, okay? But, once again, Gronk played with everything, and he gave the game everything he had.
He left it on the field, I agree.
His body was broken down, and he did the smart thing. He got out. He couldn't do anymore.
Yeah.
So I give Gronk a lot of credit. He had a lot of surgeries. That body was broken down.
Yeah, back surgery and
back,
all.
shoulder. I mean, it was time.
I love seeing what he's promoting with himself and how he's on commercials and he's doing all these things. He's actually enjoying life.
He is.
Rather than working that hard.
He's made some
to
comments,
beat
though,
up.
like, oh, my CTE's gone, or, you know, I don't think I have.
Yeah.
You
what
know
age
what, Gronk,
will that
let's
show
see.
up? When will that show up?
They say that it shows up after they're done playing. So in Hernandez's case, they had never seen it as bad.
Yeah.
And that his symptoms would have started a decade ago. So he was at 27. They said he may have been showing symptoms a lot younger.
In Hernandez's case, would you say
that was an extreme case.
He was a brutal in early years? He must have taken hits when he was young, and it just deteriorated his brain.
Yeah, I don't know.
He was an animal.
Hard to say.
At young, it's
hard to say.
He felt he was indestructible. We all
right.
do when we're young.
CTE, like I said, we're still learning a lot about it, so it's hard for me to say. You know, there's a lot of guys out there who never, you know, I hear this argument a lot, especially with CTE, to go back. A lot of people say, I know people who played football for 20 years. They're fine. They never show anything.
Sure.
Once again, it depends on your position, depends on the hits you took, it depends on the other player hitting you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variables, so it's hard for people to say, well, I played and I never got hit. Well, if you were a kicker, you're not going to get hit. You know, most guys who get hit are cornerbacks, linebackers, wide receivers. Those are the guys who are most likely to take those kind of hits. Right. So it does depend, and that's something that we have to keep in mind. It also depends on your own anatomy and your own physiological makeup. There's genetics involved. There's other factors. So we can't just chalk it up to, once again, not everybody who plays football is going to wind up with CTE or not. You know, there's other factors here. So
you're attributing CTE to more than just football, or
it's more than just football.
They're taking hits.
Hockey, they're taking hits. There's equestrian riders who fall. Skiing, snowboarding. You know, it takes a couple hits. It's repetitive hits. It's not just one hit. Boxers were the first people. But I have read several martial art articles have come out very recently with martial artists stating now, after 20 years, they are showing symptoms now. My brain was just asked, and I have donated my brain on the concussion research registry. My brain will go to research now after the hits I've taken. My last concussion was 10 years ago, and it was through a punch. Somebody punched me. It was one of those situations where I was not wearing headgear, but it wouldn't have saved me even if it was. No, it was a shot to the eye socket. It blew out my peripheral vision.
Wow.
And, you know, it was just one of those 1 in a million. Even the doctor said it was a 1 in a million shot. The person was wearing a foam dip glove, so it was not much padding. He hit me in the eye. And after my head, they said the same thing. My head snapped back like a Pez dispenser. I never went down, stood up. You know, my head just snapped back. I kind of bent my knees, stood up. And all my instructor did was look at me. He goes, go to the bathroom, wash your face. I came back out, and my head was pounding. And I took my gloves off, and he said, let's do self-defense. And he said, step back with your right foot. And I remember looking down and thinking, my right foot, step back with my right foot. And I kept saying it.
Yeah.
Did not know my right foot, which is not that unusual for me. I'm a little dyslexic. But I really didn't know my right foot. I stood there and for a good 2 minutes and just kept thinking my right. And he finally came over. He goes, what the hell's wrong with you? And I just attributed to, I'm tired. Is
this happening in football too? I mean, they're taking hits. They have to
and
go to the
right
sideline.
Back.
No?
In games.
Yeah.
But in practice, you're going right back. And I went right back out, and I shouldn't have. I know I shouldn't have. I left. I went through the rest of the class. It was 2 hours. I went through. I remember being in the store, sneezing, and my head just hurting and black soot coming out of my nose, and thinking, it's probably not good. And it took me 2 more days to go to the doctors. I threw up that night, and I knew all the symptoms. I knew them. And then I went to the doctor. She said, you have one hell of a concussion, but I had blown out my peripheral vision. I had pressure and bleeding behind the eye. I was supposed to stay out for 6 months, but of course it was Worlds. I was trying out.
Yeah.
I stayed out for a week. I was back on the mat.
So just like football players and any sports players,
Yeah.
they want to get right back in
Yeah.
and do it. But your
Doesn't
knowledge as an LPN, was that all before or after?
That was after.
This was after.
This
So
was before. No, my concussion was before.
Right.
I went to school after
Right.
that, and I knew. It's just when it's happening to you, it's different. For some reason, you always think you're something different, or you know it, but for some reason,
Well, yeah,
it's just
we all live in denial with that.
Yeah.
Competitive denial, I call it.
But now I think, and I got my bell rung probably 8 months later. I got punched in the head. I did something wrong. I don't know what I did to piss off my instructor, but I did something. And we were sparring no headgear, and he hook punched me in the head. I went down on my knee, and I heard bells. And I thought, wow, this is why they call it getting your bell rung. That was my first reaction, not like, ooh. And I stood up. I hit him back, but my reaction was like, this is getting. I had never had my bell rung, so I didn't understand it. But not, oh, I had a concussion a couple months ago. I probably shouldn't be doing this, you idiot.
Where was this in conjunction to getting in the Hall of Fame?
I had already been in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I
just needed another.
So you had that
belt.
competitive edge that you had to keep going.
Yeah, and that's
Just like a
always the
football
mistake.
player or anybody.
But
in
this is what
sport.
gets you in trouble, and you don't think of it. So I do understand that competitive edge as you're describing it. And when you're in there, especially as a woman, and I can only speak to that side of it. I can't speak to what these football players do, but you can't, when you're surrounded by guys, and especially if you're training at a school where there's 16-year-olds, and there's a lot of testosterone there, you have to keep up.
Of course.
Because they don't respect you. They just don't. You got to put these boys on the butt. You're just trying to keep up and
That's
show.
your competitive side.
That's the competitive side, and that's what it's like as a woman in the martial arts.
Sounds like you're manning up.
Yeah, that's what it is. You
I
man
can
up.
get in trouble for saying that.
No, I'm not gonna beat you up for that. Don't worry about it.
Not
This
you,
is not,
but the media could.
Everybody calm down about that, okay?
So Danielle, I want to talk about your idea for a helmet. I know you've discussed it with me many times, and it was very interesting. I would like to know where it could go if they would actually listen and care about the players enough to do this.
I've kind of gone back and forth on two different helmet ideas because after watching football and actually being concerned about the players, because I've looked at it and there's only so much you can do with a helmet. You can't seatbelt your brain. I wish we could. I wish we could find a way.
I didn't even know our brain moves.
Your brain moves.
Jiggles.
It jiggles. It's like Jell-O. It jiggles. But there's only so many ways you can protect it. When you see these players come out in their helmets, there are some that are better than others. Vicus is a great company. Richard Sherman sits on the board, who's the 49ers cornerback, and it's a great idea. But at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do with a helmet. The way I tried to look at it was, instead of giving this pseudoscience and this false bravado of, I'm going to protect your head, what about just giving more information to the players to make these decisions? Because as we said, there's a lot of players out there that are leaving the game early.
Yeah.
Some of them maybe unnecessarily. So I looked at it two different ways. As we said, there's no way to give a diagnostic test to say, yes, you definitely have a concussion, or no, you don't. Subconcussive hits are also a problem where it's just under a concussion.
Yeah.
And it's the repetitive blows. So one idea was a gel impact helmet. So the way I'm doing it is, my thought was, you have a helmet. How do you know when that helmet is done protecting you?
Yeah.
Because the helmet can be compromised as well. I mean, just like any body of a car or anything like that. So the idea was to have a helmet that would register how many hits the player has taken. And when the player has taken enough hits, subconcussive, that they are now in danger.
Well, is this documented when they're taking these hits?
No. That's the first part. There's nobody.
Their agent's got to be.
Well,
or
you're
somebody's
watching,
gotta
but
be,
the problem is the subconcussive hits. You see, we're all worried about that one big hit. We've all seen that.
Right.
We've all seen, that one, like, the hit Mason Rudolph took, where we all saw him, where he went down and he postured, and we were like, wow, damn, that's a bad hit. He's out cold. We've seen those hits.
Yeah.
We all know those ones. But it's the small ones. It's every time they bounce into it, because remember, we're not saying it's just your head, it's your body that can be hit.
Impact.
So I'm looking for a helmet that will actually tell me, okay, that player's taken 20 hits. Now, if we can keep count of those, what I'm looking for is, I've developed this idea that this helmet would then say, this player is now taking X amount of hits that add up to this. This is now a concussion, or we're almost there. At that point, the gel fluid, almost like a glow stick, would leak into the face mask and light up. At that point, that would allow the referees or the eye in the sky, since Goodell put that in, that's at you, Goodell, that player could come off and sign a waiver saying, yes, I'm aware I've taken X amount of hits. Do I want to get back in the game? Do I not want to get back in the game? Because now the player has informed consent, which is something the players have said. We didn't know. So now you have it. This does two things. One, puts power back in the player's hands. Two, it takes it out of the owners, because now the owners can't, they're out
They're
now.
held harmless.
Yeah. So the player can decide. I think it's a little bit better. Now, we all know the player's going to say, yes, I'm getting back in there. But there might be a couple players out there that are a little worried about their brains that might say, you know what? We're down 49-7. I ain't getting back in this game this go around. Or this is not a playoff game. There's nothing to risk here. I'm not going back in. I've taken 20 hits.
Well, yeah, why take the extra hits and impact?
So it's something to at least consider. So that was one idea I've had. I have spoken to some players about it who were like, you know what? It gives me information I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
It lets me know how many times.
Right.
It also would give data to analytics to say, you know what? This type of position gets X amount of hits.
Yeah.
So that was one. The other idea I had was an X-ray vision helmet, because we all hear, I don't know what goes on during a concussion, or we think the brain goes this way or that way. Well, there's linear force, there's rotational force, there's all different things. There's shearing. What I wanted to do, and the idea I've already had a mock-up done, is a little brain floating in the helmet that you could see. Okay, is it pretty? No, but it's necessary. With accelerometers around it. And basically, when the player takes a hit, the brain would float just like it would in cerebral spinal fluid. It's easy to figure out the viscosity and the density of cerebral spinal fluid. It would then touch a sensor to let you know with exactly the amount of force and motion that hit and the area of the brain that was hit. This would then fly and let you know, okay, the frontal lobe hit, the parietal lobe hit, whatever side, and register. This would tell you how many times the brain actually did get shaken up.
That's interesting.
Now you could see it happen. Now it doesn't mean it's a concussive hit, or it's just a subconcussive hit, or maybe it's just a hit. It's not really that big of a deal. But the player would know at the end of the game, my brain got shaken up 96 times in one game.
In one game.
Whatever, okay? But it would go and actually have a data bank that it would go into.
Yeah.
So now you know. Now let's say you did sustain a bad hit. Let's say you're a player and you got a bad hit. You would know exactly what areas of the brain were affected. Now, can you run and get an MRI? No, but you know what? We all say, or at least medical science says, there's no diagnostic test. Well, what if you knew exactly what area of the brain was hit and affected? Maybe they could come up with a test.
With technology today, there's no diagnostic
No,
test?
nothing shows up. But it's a little different with the MRIs being right there in most stadiums. If you knew exactly what was hit, maybe now we could come up with a little something with that information.
Yeah.
But you'd also have a cerebral health history of how many times your brain was hit for the entire season. That might be able to come up with a CTE sliding risk scale. There's different, now with all that information, there's a lot of different things you could do with that. And for a player, one might help you out with negotiations. There is a double-edged sword because now the owners know how many times you've been hit too, so that could go a different way. But now you have an idea of what positions are really at risk. Instead of us just guessing, you really would have a better idea. So I think it could really be of use. And now you could also see in real time what exactly happens to the brain during that hit. So it's not that difficult to find out. Now, what I've heard from people is, one, it's not sexy on the helmets because the logos. And if you got a little floating brain up there, who the heck wants to look at that? Okay, I get it. But if this is to protect the players and a game that, let's face it, is America's pastime. I know baseball claims that, but football makes a lot of money. Wouldn't you want to do that for them? That's how I see it.
I don't see the NFL wanting to do that, but I see the history from before now with what's moving forward with technology. I could see the players doing it because the player that just retired was all broken up that he had to leave the game.
Luke Kuechly was very,
And he, all that work to get to where he was at a young age.
That's a part, yes.
I mean, you have football players, 38, 39, still playing quarterback. Let's talk about
Tom Brady.
From what I
Avocado
understand,
ice cream ain't gonna save you.
Didn't he try to develop a helmet?
He did, and I know he was also arguing because he liked his helmet. He was trying to develop a helmet with accelerometers. Riddle has a helmet that does have accelerometers.
Just explain accelerometer.
An accelerometer, it will see exactly the impact, how fast you're going when you take a hit. But the thing with theirs is that their speed flex is about anywhere from $450, I believe, to $750. And they do have a sensor that will tell you if a player has taken an extra hit, and it will register. But you have to pay separate for that. It's $150. Okay. You don't have to get it with the helmet. Most people do not get it with the helmet. So then what the heck's the point of the accelerometer and this sensor? And it only registers certain hits.
Well, from what I understand, it wasn't accepted by the NFL.
It is now a speed flex, but it is accepted, but a lot of people don't get the sensor. So then there's really no point to it. Yeah. And the other problem I have with it, it's not addressing the subconcussive hits, which we all are saying is a problem. There's not enough research in it. And if repetitive hits are the problem with CTE, wouldn't that make sense the subconcussive hits are as much of a factor as the big ones? So I'm a little confused by it, to be honest. I think, once again, we're by saying, oh, I have accelerometers in my helmet, and then I have the sensor, which I'm not using. Well, what the heck's the point to it?
Yeah.
So, there's different ways to look at it. I'm not claiming that these helmets are going to save your head. I'm not claiming extra safety measures. I'm saying that these are data gathering ideas that will go into any helmet that maybe somebody else can come up with that could make it safer. But we do have to remember, helmets are just protecting the outside. They're not safety belting your brain to your skull.
Sure.
So I can't stop you from getting hit. I've seen the shirts that people are claiming that somehow protect your neck and they're full of copper or something, I don't know, and they're going to stop it.
Well, let me ask you this. Wouldn't, for insurance purposes, the NFL want to do this?
One would think.
Yeah.
You got to ask them on that one because I really don't understand that. I would think that I did speak to one major sports clothing manufacturer company about the helmets. They loved it. They just don't make hard back sports equipment. But what they told me was they actually told me go to the XFL with this.
Yeah.
And they said, to be honest, certain members of the NFL, who shall remain nameless, will never accept this from a woman. So there, I put it out to all of you to do something with it.
Well, that would be even more reason to do it then.
One would think, but they won't let me in. And you got to go through...
You're definitely qualified.
You got to go through the NCAA and have it tested. And it's a whole thing. There's no speedway. There's no speed track to this, unfortunately.
But the future, something's got to be done. Would you agree?
Something's got to be done. To be honest, what I would say to the XFL is take helmets away. Put leather helmets on everybody, change your rules a little bit, and then give the NFL a run for your money. Because
that's not a bad idea.
That's the only way to make it the XFL and to make yourself different than the NFL. You can do all these rule changes about this, and that. But at the end of the day, show that you're really different and take the helmets off. Put leather helmets on like they used to.
You make an interesting point there.
And make it really different for a year and try it out and see how many concussions you have.
I thought that was the whole concept of the XFL, to make it different than the NFL.
I thought so, but the only thing I will say is they're only using two helmets.
Okay.
Two types of helmets, the Speed Flex and one other. So maybe they're trying to do it differently, but I don't know.
Okay, before we wrap, I just wanted to go back to the helmet real quick. To me, that fit really nice. I felt comfortable in it if I was getting hit. But it's not going to protect me from a good kick to the head.
No.
How about if
that's
it had
not.
a shell around it?
Well,
like
then
a
you got to
football.
worry. Then you got to worry about the person who's kicking you with their foot, because when we kick more with the instep, the top of our foot.
Yeah.
So, and what we wear on our foot is only this type of padding.
Yeah.
So it's really a toss up on that, and that's part of the problem with martial arts is that
Yeah.
we try to pull our kicks, but anybody who's competed in a tournament, and you know who I'm talking to out there, we all know that even though we're supposed to pull our kicks, we don't. We always get that one kick in to scare the other opponent.
Right.
I know I used to. So we just I know a trick. And you guys know who I'm talking to out there. You know the point spars, What we used to do is we used to deaden their arm. We would kick as hard as we could to the guarding arm until we made it pink. And then we just sit there and hit them and hit them. And then wait till because then once you got it pink, you knew the next kick they'd move it and then you'd score. That's what you did. It's just what you do. I mean, it's, so, maybe it's a dirty fighting. Okay, maybe it is. But that's what you do. So it's...
I think you made your point on the concussions as well as the competitive side, especially from a woman like Dani. I'm going to wrap. I think you're a ball of information, and our next segment's going to be even more interesting because we're going to have you go toe-to-toe with another...
Aren't you bringing some cowboys around?
I think I will. I'd like to thank Mike, our videographer, who does a great job, Absolute Motion.
Yay, Mike!
Production supervisor, really. I also want to thank our makeup artist and hair, Denise Apostle. I want to thank Chef Rob, our sponsor. And thank you for all tuning in. We want to bring you more of these episodes, so please subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Also ask questions because we'd like to see how Danielle does with the audience that probably has a lot to say about
a lot
of
it
this.
out like that.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks, Danielle.